What's going on, guys? My name is Matt, and today we're checking out the most popular pre-built gaming PC on Amazon. Now, with the current PC hardware market, a lot of people are turning to pre-builts as a way of getting into PC gaming. This is fine, but many of the pre-builts being sold are either overpriced, using low quality parts, or both. Because of this, I went on a search for the most purchased pre-builts and picked one up to see if they're any good. Amazon is the largest retailer, so I figured I'd start there. Going on to Amazon, the number one selling pre-built is this $950 CyberPower PC. It's got good reviews, decent specs, and on paper looks overall like a pretty solid option. With that being said, specs don't tell the whole story, so I decided to pick one up and test it out to see if the most popular pre-built on Amazon is actually worth it. This is prime shipping, so it landed on my door in about 2 days, and looking at the outside of the box, it came in without any major dings or dents. One questionable thing was the tape job. It almost looked like it was retaped because these tape folds are not something you would see on a factory new product. On the outside of the box, there's some CyberPower branding, basic spec info, and some handles. Opening it up, the first thing I was greeted by was some really thick and durable closed-cell foam. This was great to see, as it means even if the box is roughed up in shipping, the PC inside should still be fine. I then flipped it over and slid out the PC itself. Other than the system, you also get this keyboard box, this bag with a mouse and a bunch of accessories, and a quick start guide. Getting the PC out of the foam and bag, I was able to get my first good look at it and was happy to see it looked like it was in perfect condition and looked pretty nice overall. On the back, there's this giant sticker warning the user to make sure to use the display output on the graphics card and not the motherboard, which may seem obvious to you and I, but I think this is a good idea for people who aren't very computer savvy. One downside of this is the sticker they used left a ton of residue, which was pretty disappointing. I decided to follow the quick start guide to see what it would be like for the average consumer, and the first thing it tells me to do is remove the side panel and pull out the internal foam. Removing the side panel, we find Instapak foam, which is on the more expensive side packing material wise, but is the best way to protect computer internals during shipping, and it's great to see CyberPower PC using it. Pulling out the foam, I found a pretty clean looking system, and pulling off the back panel, I found what I would consider adequate cable management. It's not amazing or anything, but each cable is efficiently routed and nothing is tangled together. Also, behind the back panel, I was shocked to see an 80+ gold sticker on the power supply, which is great, and I'll talk more about that in a minute. In terms of core specs, things look good with one flaw. The CPU is a 6-core 12-thread Intel Core i5-10400F. This is a good mid to entry-level gaming CPU and is perfect for a system like this. The 10400F will be able to handle any game you throw at it, and it runs pretty efficiently. It's being cooled by this basic aluminum Intel stock cooler, which isn't great but worked fine, and you'll be able to see temps in the benchmark section of the video. The CPU and cooler are seated in the Gigabyte B560M DS3HAC, which is actually a surprisingly good board for a pre-built. The motherboard is usually an area where these companies skip out on and throw in the cheapest $60 board that will be compatible, but in this case, this B560M board retails for around $120. It has 4 DIMM slots, good PCIe expansion, decent back panel I/O, and built-in Wi-Fi, which will be a huge plus for many people. For RAM, this is one area where I really have to knock CyberPower PC. They used a single 8GB stick of 3200 MHz DDR4. Please, pre-built companies, just include 16GB of dual channel RAM and charge like $50 more. This system will perform better in a lot of games with 16GB of dual channel RAM, and I'll be showing you the difference in the benchmark section of this video. For storage, the system comes with a 500GB WD Blue SM550, which is a good quality entry-level NVMe SSD. I've used a ton of these in past pre-builds and think this is a great selection for a system like this. 500GB may not be enough for a lot of people, but upgrading storage is super simple even for someone who isn't tech savvy. Now let's talk about the graphics card. If graphics cards weren't so expensive right now, then these pre-builds would be a lot less popular. The PC was advertised to have a GTX 1660 Super, but actually came with the slightly better 1660 Ti, which was fine by me. This is a good entry to mid-entry tier card, perfect for 1080p 60fps gaming and modern titles. It has 6GB of video memory and other nice features like the NVENC encoder, which helps for people wanting to stream, and I will be testing streaming later in the video. The power supply was another area where I was really impressed, as this is usually where manufacturers will use a subpar unit to cut costs. This PC is using an EVGA 600GD. This is an 80 plus gold rated 600 watt power supply that isn't top tier, but again is much better than what I expected to see. 600 watts is way more than enough for this PC, and even though it is non-modular, it has all black sleeve cables, and there's plenty of room to hide them in this case. Speaking of the case, this is using a modified version of a Cooler Master case with a modified front mash panel, and it has 4 ARGB fans that look really nice in my opinion. There's a tempered glass side panel, power supply basement, multiple dust filters, and the list goes on. Taking all this into consideration, for $950, this is a good set of hardware taking into account the current state of the PC hardware market. Now if you buy this PC, please upgrade the RAM. Something like this $60 3600 MHz kit would work great, and again I'll show you the performance difference later on. With all that being said, hardware is only half the equation, and the software end of things could make or break the experience. Booting it up for the first time, I was brought to the usual Windows setup prompts, and once completed, it booted right into Windows. I started for looking for bloatware like proprietary programs or crappy antivirus software like McAfee. To my surprise, there was none. This is pretty much a fresh install of Windows with drivers. Now there were some Windows and other driver updates that need to be done, but between setting up my Windows account and updating drivers, I was ready to game within an hour of opening the box, which is definitely not what the case would be if I had built the PC from scratch. Now let's talk about the gaming and streaming performance. Again, I tested with the single channel 8GB and with a 2x8GB kit to see the performance difference. I only tested streaming with the 16GB kit, as I would not at all recommend streaming with only 8GB. You'll be able to see utilization, temps, average FPS, 1% lows, and 0.1% lows changing dynamically in the top left of each benchmark. I tested 6 different games, some easy to run and some hard to run, to give you a good idea of the overall performance of the system. Let's start things off with Fortnite. I tested this game at 1080p Pro, which for me is epic view distance, high textures, and pretty much everything else set to low. With the single 8GB kit, the PC put out a 177 FPS average with 1% lows of 52. Now when I tested it with 16GB, the performance jumped to 212 FPS and the 1% lows jumped to 94. This is a pretty big performance jump, and the large increase in 1% lows made the game feel noticeably smoother. Next, I tested Borderlands 3, which is a difficult to run AAA game. I used the built-in benchmark at 1080p high, and with the 8GB of RAM, the system put out a 67 FPS average with 1% lows of 31. This is decent performance, but with 16GB, the numbers went up to 72 for the average and 55 for the 1% lows, which again smoothed things out a lot. For Rainbow Six Siege, I tested at 1080p very high with the built-in benchmark. The 8GB configuration produced a 280 FPS average with 1% lows of 219, and the 16GB configuration was almost exactly the same with a 287 FPS average with 1% lows of 220. So this is a good example of a game that actually runs fine on 8GB. With that being said, this is with a clean system running nothing in the background. Once you start adding stuff in the background like Chrome, Discord, Spotify, and more, that 8GB is going to really start to hold you back. Horizon Zero Dawn was another game that didn't see huge improvements between 8 and 16GB with a 78 and 82 FPS average respectively. This is another hard to run AAA game, and with it at 1080p high, it shows pretty much any game is gonna run at 60 plus FPS on this machine. In Valorant at 1080p medium, I saw an average of 186 and 217 respectively, and 1% lows of 113 and 125 respectively, so minor improvements but still decent gains and overall great performance. Finally, in Apex Legends at 1080p medium, the system put out a 121 and 125 FPS average, along with 85 and 91 for the 1% lows. For streaming, I just streamed Fortnite to Twitch at 1080p 60 FPS and saw both a smooth experience on the gameplay side and the stream side. Overall, performance on the system is great, and you can play with the 8GB if you have to, but I highly recommend upgrading to 16GB as soon as possible, and I'll leave a few kits linked in the description below. I'll also have a link to how to install your new RAM in the description also. In terms of other included items, you get a keyboard, mouse, and some paperwork / accessories. The keyboard is a full-size membrane board that has some nice features like dedicated media controls. Like I said, this is a membrane keyboard, but it does have a little bit of tactility, but overall is pretty mushy. It's fine to get you up and running, but I would recommend upgrading to a mechanical keyboard in the future. The mouse is also pretty decent for getting you up and running. It tracks decently well, has removable weights, and plenty of extra buttons. Now there are a few problems with it. First is the scratchy scroll wheel, and second is the DPI button. Within a few clicks it became stuck in the housing of the mouse. This is a known problem and I tried a bunch of stuff but couldn't fix it. This is pretty annoying because it means you need to control the mouse sensitivity through software. Taking all this into consideration, I think this PC is actually a really good value per dollar, especially given the current market. Again, definitely upgrade the RAM. I'll have this PC and RAM kits linked in the description. I'm trying to do more of these pre-build and laptop videos, so if you have suggestions on ones I should check out, let me know in the comments below. So yeah guys, I think this wraps this video up. I hope you guys enjoyed it. If you did, make sure to give it a thumbs up and consider subscribing, and as always, this is Matt from Tech by Matt, signing out.